My name is Chloe. I wasn't always lonely. But after my last relationship ended in silence rather than a goodbye, the solitude clung to me like smoke, unseen, but everywhere. Evenings were the hardest. The walls of my apartment echoed with a stillness too loud to ignore. I worked from home, ate dinner alone, and talked more to my houseplants than to people. My friends had long since drifted into marriages, parenthood, lives too full to fit me in. I understood. I didn't blame them. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. One night, after scrolling through photos of people smiling beside people who chose them, I downloaded a dating app. Not out of optimism, but out of something quieter. Desperation, maybe. Or a longing I didn't have the courage to name. That's when I met David. His profile was simple. No shirtless mirror pics, no pretentious quotes. Just a smile that reached his eyes and a caption that said, "Looking for something real." I messaged him first. He replied within minutes. Conversation flowed like we'd known each other in another life. He asked questions that mattered. What keeps you up at night? What song feels like home? He listened, really listened. We moved from texts to video calls, from strangers to something more. Within days, he knew about my insomnia, my love for poetry, the scar on my knee from falling off a bike at 10. He recited Maya Angelou to me one night over video call and told me his ex-wife never understood him. That he wasn't looking to waste time. That maybe, just maybe, we'd found what most people never do. That I wanted to believe him. And maybe that was the first betrayal, mine, against my own instincts. When he asked to meet in person, I hesitated for only a moment. He drove 5 hours just to take me to lunch. He brought daisies, not roses. Said roses felt too rehearsed. I laughed, and for the first time in a long while, it felt easy. 2 weeks later, he said he loved me. 1 week after that, he asked me to marry him. It sounds ridiculous, I know. But when you've spent years invisible, even a whisper of love feels like a roar. I said yes. We married in a courthouse. No family, no fanfare. Just us. I wore a pale blue dress and carried the daisies he brought again, this time without prompting. He held my hand too tightly, but I told myself it was nerves. As I signed the marriage certificate, a voice in the back of my mind, soft but persistent, asked, "Are you sure?" I silenced it with a smile. After all, I wasn't lonely anymore. The first month felt like a continuation of the fairy tale. David made breakfast on Sundays, kissed my forehead before work, and left sticky notes with half-written poems on the bathroom mirror. I kept every one of them in a box beneath the bed, like charms to ward off doubt, but slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, the rhythm changed. The notes stopped appearing. He began leaving early, returning late, always with vague excuses. Work. Traffic. Helping a friend. He said it casually, each reason barely a sentence. At first, I believed him. I wanted to. But belief, I learned, is not the same as trust. David's phone, once left carelessly on counters and couches, now never left his pocket. He began taking calls in the other room, his voice hushed, clipped. I asked about it once. He laughed. "You're overthinking again, CLO. You always do this." I didn't remember ever doing this. His affection cooled. Where there had been warmth, now there was courtesy. He no longer kissed me goodnight, only muttered it, half asleep, turning away before I could answer. I reached for him, often, and found only his back. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a small gold earring tucked into the hem of his shirt. It wasn't mine. I held it in my palm, the metal cool and weightless, like a question I didn't want to ask. When I confronted him, he barely blinked. "Probably from an Uber," he said. "People drop stuff all the time." He took it from me, tossed it into a drawer, and kissed my cheek with mechanical precision. I nodded. But the moment lived on, circling like a hawk above my thoughts that I told myself not to pry, not to snoop, not to become that wife. Instead, I kept quiet. But quiet is not peace. It is paralysis that I started writing again, something I hadn't done since before him. Just fragments. Sentences that started with, I feel, and ended without verbs. I didn't recognize myself in them, but I felt more honest on the page than I did in my own home. At night, I lay beside a man whose body I knew and whose mind now felt barricaded. I stared at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, trying to remember the last time he had said, I love you, without looking at a screen. That I began to wonder if love, real love, was ever really there, or if I had imagined the whole thing, desperate to be chosen by anyone who said the right words. The daisies he once brought had wilted weeks ago, and I hadn't had the heart to throw them away. They stood on the windowsill still, dry, brittle, and pretending to be beautiful. David said he had a client dinner, last minute, unavoidable. He didn't kiss me goodbye. Just grabbed his keys, adjusted his tie, and left with the same absence he brought home each night. Something about the way he avoided my eyes that morning stayed with me. It clung to my ribs like a bruise. By 7 p.m., I was pacing. By 8 o'clock, I was outside, wrapped in a coat, sitting behind the wheel of my car. I didn't have a plan, only suspicion and a silence I could no longer endure. That I drove to his office first. Empty. Then to a downtown restaurant he'd once mentioned. I parked across the street and waited. The minutes passed slowly, thick with dread. At 9:12 p.m., he appeared, not alone. That he walked beside a woman, tall, with long auburn hair and confidence in her stride. She laughed, her hand on his arm, his body leaning in, smiling in that familiar way he hadn't smiled at me in weeks. He looked like a man in love. Just not with me. That I stayed in the car. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I just watched as they disappeared inside. Then I took out my phone and snapped a photo. Not for revenge. Not for leverage. For confirmation. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That my heart hadn't been inventing ghosts. Back home, I waited for him. When he returned after midnight, smelling faintly of wine and lavender, he kissed my temple and said, sorry it ran late. I nodded. The next morning, after he left, I opened his laptop. His password hadn't changed. What I found was not one woman, but many. Messages layered like sediment, dates, flirtations, late-night confessions, photos I wished I hadn't seen. Some of them dated back to our honeymoon week. My breath caught in my throat. Not from shock. From clarity. The truth didn't stab, it settled. Heavy. Certain. Complete. When he returned that night, I didn't wait. I know, I said. That he didn't ask, know what? He didn't scramble or lie. He just sighed. As if relieved. We moved too fast, he said, sitting at the edge of the bed. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. I stared at him. This man who had once recited poetry and pressed daisies into my palm, was I just filler? I asked. A space to hide in until you figured yourself out? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, you were comforting. Not cherished. Not loved. Comforting. The word felt like a verdict. That I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I simply stood, walked into the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. That I didn't recognize the woman staring back, but for the first time, I wanted to. The next morning, I brewed coffee like usual. Set out 2 mugs. Out of habit, not hope. David didn't show. He'd gone for a run, or to clear his head, he never said which. I didn't ask. That I packed slowly. Not just clothes, but pieces of myself I'd scattered through our brief, broken life. Books I never finished, candles burned halfway, the journal with pages smudged by grief. Each item I touched felt like evidence from a dream I was waking up from, that he wasn't home when I slipped out the door, that I left the daisies on the windowsill, that I moved into a small studio across town. Just me, a chipped kettle, and quiet that felt different now, less like a void, more like space. Room to stretch without being afraid of what I might bump into. That I started therapy. At first, I spoke in circles, trying to make sense of how quickly a promise could turn into punishment. But week by week, I began to speak plainly. The words stopped trembling. I stopped apologizing for loving too hard, too soon. That in the evenings, I wrote again, real writing this time. Not just fragments, but pages. Stories. Letters I'd never send. I wrote to the version of me that said yes in a courthouse, and to the one who stood in silence when she found the earring. I forgave them both. Sometimes I thought about David. Not with longing, but curiosity. Who he was when he wasn't betraying. What version of him had been real? But I stopped needing answers. The photo I took that night at the restaurant? I deleted it. I realized I no longer needed proof. Pain had already proven enough. One Saturday, I walked to the park alone. It was the same park we'd once talked about raising kids near. I sat on a bench beneath a maple tree and watched a young couple pass by, laughing, fingers interlaced. It didn't make me ache. It just was that I realized healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It unfolds quietly. In clean sheets. In grocery lists written only for yourself. In sleeping through the night and waking without dread. That I didn't become stronger because of him, that I became stronger despite him. Sometimes, I still remember the way he looked at me that first night on video call. And then I remember how easy it was for him to look away. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone else. Someone rebuilding. Someone real, not a placeholder, not a comfort. Me.